Welcome to the 7th night of Kyphi. I have a couple of viewer questions I'm going to answer before I start compounding this evening's edition. I have received a lot of questions from folks who ask me, do I always grind my intention into the compounding? In other words, do I always grind diacetyl for positive intentions and widdershins for banishing or eliminating of something? Now my answer is, when I am ready, when I have the incense compound where I want it, the last thing I do is stir it according to the intention that I have for it. I usually give it like a minute of going diacetyl or going widdershins according to the working I'm doing. But if the question is, and I think it has been by a couple of you, do I, throughout the entire process, always work in one direction? No, I do not. I did when I was younger. The entire time I was working on something, I only worked in one direction. However, these are the hands that are almost 60 years old. I'm lucky I can still pick this up because of arthritis at this point. So I do need to vary how I am working with the pestle and even vary how I am holding it, even the hand I'm holding it in. However, I may use varying techniques, including pounding and stabbing and stirring and reverse stirring and changing the hand, whatever it takes for me to reduce what I'm working with. But when it is ground down or almost down to the point I want it, then is when I focus intentionally, paying attention to my hand and the direction I am going in. So the questions were, did I do that the entire time? And no, I do not. However, at the end, right before I'm finished compounding it, I will use a specific intent with the way I finish up the compounding. If you're young, you may do what I did for many, many years, which is I always work in one direction. If you are handicapped in some way, or if your hands are getting a little bit older like mine are, there's how I do it, and I wanted to let you know that. The other question. I'm always fascinated with how observant people are because I'm not so. It takes me a while to notice things and pick up on them. Several of you emailed me to say that you noticed that when I lit the charcoal and put it on my sensor, that the sensor would move just a little bit in the next moment. So you had picked up on the fact that I was taking it away and putting it back onto the altar in a slightly different position. The reason is I nurture charcoal. I never think to mention some of these things that are common practices in the way I grew up, but might not be something that are practiced or known by those of you who are studying. When I light my charcoal disc, I make sure that it is beginning to glow inside, and then I take time with it, taking a deep inhale and then a slow, peaceful, soft exhale to feed my energy into the coal and to enliven it. In other words, I'm speeding up the burning just a little bit to spread the ember burning a little more evenly. But at the magical level, it's a matter of becoming one with the charcoal and the fire that it represents, and nurturing it, feeding it with my life essence. So there was that question. Yes, those of you who have noticed, I cut that part out because no one needs to be watching an empty patent for the however many minutes it takes me to get that charcoal where I want it. The other thing is, I've had questions about the bamboo incense. This is actually a burned, completely burned bamboo incense, which you can appreciate when I do this. And what happens is it totally consumes itself. And what's left is the tiniest little bit of ash when you break it down. What I do is I mix it right in with what is left. I'm basically creating an incense ash where a little bit of everything I've been working on, including that little bit of charcoal residue that's left at the end of each working, will be part of this sand that I will use for my own magical purposes after the Kyphi is made. So I wanted to show you how wonderful that bamboo charcoal is in the way that it totally absorbs itself and truly comes down to a little bit of nothing left. So, we are on the 7th night of Kyphi. And thank you for those of you who have put up with me while I've had some absences working out some of those personal challenges this last couple of weeks. Thank you also for your prayers and good thoughts. Kyphi has been a little more protracted for me than it usually is, but when I have been able to take the time and devote the evenings to it, it's probably been a greater blessing this year than it has been for a long, long time for me. The 7th night of Kyphi is Galangal root. And this is what we are looking at here. Galangal root is a very fascinating thing to work with. If you have it, I highly recommend that you try it. It's not terribly expensive. It's light in weight, usually comes in a good-sized bag. It's almost pithy and very light to hold. However, it also makes it a little bit difficult to compound. However, it can be compounded manually by taking a little at a time and working with it. For my work with the Kyphi, I do not want to resort to the electric grinder if I don't have to. I have to resort to it in a couple of instances to get resins down to a smaller amount, kind of kernels, and then I can take them from there. But anything that I can grind manually, no matter how long it takes, I will do by hand. Galangal root is possible. For all it doesn't seem like you could, it's very possible to grind by hand with patience and by not putting a lot in your mortar at one time, working with it bit by bit. So let's talk a little bit about Galangal root and the meaning of it. It is a creature of fire, and if you have smelled it, you will be aware of the fact that one smelling Galangal root understands immediately why it is a creature of fire. It almost has an astringent, clearing, cleaning kind of a smell. It's got a fruity smell too. Someone described it to me once as wine, deep, dark red wine that's been set out too long. When it's been opened to the air and is fermenting a bit. So you could say on the verge of spoiling. I agree with that way of describing how it sounds, but it has that astringent underlevel to it too, very biting. We're only going to use a half of a part in this recipe, which honors the fact that it is very potent in what it brings and in the way it smells. It won't surprise you to know that, like everything else that has gone into Kyphi so far, it is known for protection. Galangal root, though, unlike, for instance, the protecting energies of juniper berries, is a go at 'em, get at 'em, take action, take motion kind of protective energy. It is doing what you have to do to defend. And very much a inspirer of courage and action. So it's not like the juniper berries where there's this swirling field of protection around you and you are not intimately involved with it. Galangal root is used when you need to get your gumption up and deal with something. It is very much about doing. So another form, a different way of offering the energy of protection. It's also known as a strengthener. It is a strengthener of the body and of the spirit, in keeping with its alignment to fire, which is what courses through your veins and makes you physically healthy, and is also what flames forth from your solar plexus, that place wherein will resides. Very, very fiery element. Galangal root is also traditionally known for prosperity. I've only used it a little bit over the years for prosperity. I've actually used it more often in my life for two different things. The first is the get up and deal with it. Get off the couch and deal with your problems and drum up your courage and drum up your conviction and reach into your innermost will and attack, do, get done. So that is something I've used it for a lot. I've not used it much for prosperity, although I've put it in prosperity mixtures. Prosperity when it comes to Galangal root is the prosperity that you do something in order to have that prosperity come to you. The prosperity when it comes to Galangal is what comes after your deed. You pay attention, you get something done, you get something accomplished, and the result is prosperity. So it is very much about what you do to bring prosperity to yourself. But I haven't worked with it a lot. The other area in which I have over the years worked a lot with the Galangal root is the female sacred mysteries. So especially to the ladies who are watching, it is very much about awakening the goddess within you, and all of her aspects respond very powerfully to even the smallest amount of Galangal, burnt by itself or burnt in combination with others. It's the Amazon energy. It is the goddess warrior energy. It is the screaming banshee, raving, powerful, assertive aspects of the goddess rising up from within us. It's the part of us which has ultimate confidence in every aspect of our being. Now, gentlemen who watch, that doesn't mean that you don't want to acknowledge the power of Galangal and use it for yourself in your workings, because it is a way for you to acknowledge the power of the feminine divine, whether it be power in women you want to honor and respect in your life, or honoring the goddess herself. Very, very powerful, powerful botanical for the feminine divine in her warrior, strong, I want to say maiden, but I found that Galangal isn't really connected to any one of the phases. But when you think of the Diana kind of energy, I'm talking about the early wild Diana. That is the energy of Galangal root. Now, ladies, traditionally over time, Galangal has been used by women to increase their feminine powers for a specific end, which is attracting our men folk. You might consider it the herbal version of strutting our stuff. The gentlemen know when we stand proud and we stand strong and we are full of ourselves in a feminine way, it's very hard to be ignored. It's a very important botanical used in those ways to acknowledge the powerful, strong, focused, vital goddess. And the power of that, when we recognize it within ourselves, reaches out to all around us. So you may ask, have I ever used this in the sense of attracting a man? Not for the reason you may think. I've played with it a little bit over the years, and I have found indeed that it is almost an incense pheromone that men react to. However, I have specifically used it in a couple of instances when I wanted to obtain a particular job, or I knew I was going to be interviewing with a male. My former career was a very male-dominated one, and I used Galangal root several times to make it known to the man whose presence I was in that I was confident and capable, and it worked. It really did work. My intentions were such that I wanted myself to be known and my abilities to be known and, importantly, respected. And indeed, that is how it came to work in part of a spell for myself a couple of times in my life. I have also found at the spiritual level that if you want a deeper connection to the God, he appreciates a little Galangal. No surprise that he would be drawn to the woman who gives off that energy, that power, that sexuality. One of my friends actually called Galangal the woman's herb of the rut. So that's how powerful the energy of it is. So there I've shared with you what Galangal is in its traditional correspondences and how I have worked with it. So let me take some time, and I happen to know from working with it in the past, it will take quite some time to produce Galangal manually by hand, so that I have, thank goodness, only a half of one part, because I know the work it's going to take to get it there. I will return when I can share with you Galangal reduced.